What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto's family gave up on him but the world gave him a throne instead? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. Groaning in discomfort, Naruto would slowly rise on his hands and knees, while looking down on the leaf-covered ground. Bastard! The blonde swore as he would fall on his side and lean against a large tree while looking in front of him. It seems that Naruto had no idea where he is, but he did remember one thing: the bastard that sent him here. Obito. While they fought for 2 full days, Obito was finally brought down to the ground with Naruto gasping and panting for air in front of him. The taxation of the battle finally rolling in when his foe was brought down. His left hand was leaning on the pommel of the sword that was placed in the stone, while red blood covered the white steel. His clothing ripped on many spots, while his body held many gaping wounds which blood poured out from. While Obito was on the ground with blood leaking out of his mouth, he would look at Naruto and glare hatefully in his direction. Naruto remembered his words spoken to him. "You may win, and save what is left of this world, but you will be alone. Just as I have been, then you will feel the pain that I had to endure." And with that, Naruto was sucked into the Kamui, which sent him to the world of Westeros. While Obito was on the ground giving only a glare before his eyes closed. Even as he died, he did not feel the joy of having the final victory. And now Naruto is leaning against a tree, alone while bleeding from his wounds. No longer could he call for his eternal companion to heal his wounds or at least help him out, as Kurama was sucked out of him. The only thing he felt at the moment was just the pain of his wounds, the pain of not knowing if he defeated Obito and saved his home, and the pain of his loneliness. Now he was alone. For all he knew, this is all that is left in the world, a forest. So not caring if he would die today, he started to slowly close his eyes, wanting to have the darkness gather around him and finally send him to the land of the non-living. Yet not too long after the darkness consumed him, he suddenly opened his eyes, as he heard the sound of sticks and leaves being stepped upon. Looking to the source of the sound, he found a large cat. Its fur was black with white stripes, while it was growling at the bleeding blonde. Slowly approaching him with its maw open and its fang ready to bite down in the blonde. While at first Naruto made ready to kill the cat, he started to ponder if he even should. After all, he was about to embrace death. Why kill the cat if it could increase speed in his demise? Yet just as he was about to surrender, he had a small flash of the past of a man with orange hair and piercings in his body telling him to give up. And then back to his own words, he said to him, "You should give up, on making me give up." Opening his eyes, they had a new shine in them, and just as the cat was about to pounce on him, he took a hold of the sword in his hand and brought it up in the cat's front of its chest, killing it instantly. Slowly pulling his sword back, he would start to rise to his feet with newfound strength. Looking around, he only found forest with the ground covered in leaves. While he was tempted to sit down again and rest, he knew that he would slip into giving up again, so willing his legs to move, he made one step. Yet after one step he realized just how much wounds he had. So quickly he started to gather some of his remainder of chakra and made small blue fire in his fingertip and took out his last kunai. After the kunai gained a certain heat, he started to use the heated metal of the kunai to cut into the wounds and close the wounds. While he shouted and screamed of the pain of the heat, he finally was done. Yet after he was done, he turned to the dead cat and took out his kunai and started to skin the foot off the animal and gather its meat. While he did this, only one thought went through his mind: I will not die, I will not give up, and I will not surrender to anything or anyone. 1 week later. In his 1 week in this forest, Naruto had learned quite a bit. For one, he was not in some lone forest, but in a whole different world. After he had made his way through the forest and encounters a village with people in it, he decided to speak to them. Lucky they spoke in the same language, so that was no problem. Along with him learning things, before he approached the people, he had switched his tattered clothing with some new clothing. Sadly, all that was left was a green hooded cloak, a black vest that only went over his chest with some black pants. Luckily his cloak did have sleeves, so he did not have to suffer through cold arms. He learned that these lands were called Westeros, yet when he asked about a nation called the Elemental Countries, they only shook their heads as they did not know about this land. So that left out any hope of a possibility that he would have been sent to another country instead of another world. Yet his mind was already made up on that he refused to give up, so he kept asking them questions. Who ruled the land and what he should know. While they did question him why he asked, he explained that he is from another land. So not caring too much about it, they simply kept telling him. The land of Westeros was ruled by King Aerys II. While many said that he gone bad, he still was the king. Afterwards they told him that at the moment he was in the north, and that these lands were ruled by Lord Rickard Stark of the House Stark. Having learned enough of the people, he asked if he could know the way to the home of the Starks, at which they said that it was east of their village. Yet they told him that he would have a small chance of finding any Starks this month in Winterfell, as many high folk, as they called them, rode to the tourney of this age. As some people like to proclaim, the tourney at Harrenhal was supposed to be the biggest one in the whole realm. So after he had enough of his questions answered, he decided to make his way south to this Harrenhal. When asked the way, they simply pointed him to the road and told him to head south. Eventually, after a long trek of at least 3 weeks, he should arrive. Luckily he was not like them and simply tree-hopped alongside the road. Before the tree-hopping turned into running. Yet after 2 full days of running he decided to finally rest for a while. So after a while of his running, the day had turned into night, and now in front of him stood a large inn with lights inside and smoke rising out of their chimney. Sighing, he would open a seal on his wrist which should contain his wallet. In it were only some golden coins with a few paper bills. But from what he learned was that they have a different currency, so he was sure that the bills would be worth nothing. Instead he would use the golden coins and see what he would get. Yet outside of the inn were a lot of horses with 1 carriage in it. While 2 men in armor stood there, most likely guarding the horses. Both men were dressed in brown leather chest armor, and thick woolen clothing beneath it. Yet from the small gaps you could see the chain mail that would rest beneath it. In their left arm was a steel shield with the symbol of a growling wolf on it. While on their head rested a bucket-like helmet. Walking past them he gave them a small greeting before opening the door. Stepping inside he would see that the inn was rather filled with different people, so quickly stepping through he would arrive at the front of the bar and speak out. How much for a room? Yet the woman behind it was at the moment dealing with someone else, so maybe he should wait a bit. After waiting for a few moments she finally turned to him and raised her brow. This is now home for the homeless, unless you have coin, go sleep in the woods. With that she was about to turn away, yet Naruto placed 1 golden coin on the table and spoke up. A room, how much? With maybe a meal? Turning back to him she picked the coin up in her hand and looked it over until realizing she was holding a solid golden coin. After the realization struck in she spoke out a bit too sweetly. Please come in, we have 1 room left and it is all for you. It is at the end of the hall when you go up the stairs. And a meal will come right up. Please take a seat and it shall be brought to you. With that Naruto would turn around and head to an empty table in a corner and sits down while looking around for a moment. Some men were looking at him with caution as the cloak kept his face hidden and he just walked in while not even knowing the slightest bit about him. Some did not really give him a care in the world. Deciding not to dwell too long on the people in the inn, he would close his eyes while letting his mind trail off to his thoughts. Yet to most it just seemed that he was looking at whatever was in front of him as the shadow of the cowl kept his eyes hidden. At the moment his face was directed to an enlarged table that held 4 people. 3 boys and 1 girl. All of them had dark hair with gray eyes. Their clothing looked rather expensive compared to most, yet not too rich that would shout royalty. They were talking with one another and making jokes, yet once Naruto sat down on his chair, the eldest of the 4 kept his gaze on the cloaked blonde, not sure what to think. He just wished that stranger would turn his face away from him. It made him uncomfortable, and he knew that he would get rather aggravated if someone makes him uncomfortable. Back with the cloaked blonde, he was in his thoughts, thinking what he should do. His original plan was to find some work and make a coin. Yet learning that people in this world had not the power that the shinobi had made him reluctant. He might as well reform this world if he liked without anything to stop him. Yet that was not his way. No, he wished to make his place in this world, but at least do it within boundaries. Yet that did not mean he could not have some fun with his jutsu. Yet before he could start claiming his own house he would have land. And for that he would have to buy it. Which is why he would now go to the tourney of Harrenhal. He did not doubt his skills in battle for him to win at least a battle with the sword. After all, he and Glamdring have brought down many foes, and they were shinobi. suddenly feeling a hand on his shoulder which caused him to open his eyes and come eye to eye with the woman from the bar. In front of him was a plate with some pork chops, along with a bowl of soup and of course a tankard of ale. "Excuses me, me lord, but I must have your name to know for who the room is." As she said that, Naruto nodded his head. "Does my actual name have to be written down? Or will a travel name suffice?" asked the blonde. At which the woman spoke out, "Everything for the right price." Sighing lightly he spoke out, "Naruto Uzumaki." With that, the woman, rather confused at the strange name, but took it either way. As he paid top-notch for a room, she rather not question it. Walking off again, Naruto started to dig into the food, rather enjoying the taste of having to hunt his own food on the road. Not that it was bad, but food from a kitchen is something he rather ate. He enjoyed the dinner so much that he did not notice the two men that stood in front on his table until one spoke out. "You are in our seat, boy," spoke the man. Naruto would raise his head from his dinner and look at the two men in front of him. They bore simple and cheap armor, with on their vests was the symbol of two towers with a bridge between them. They in full honesty looked like unkempt men, dirty with ugly faces. Deciding not to let himself be intimidated, he simply stared them down. Most people seemed to shiver under a stare of Sasuke, so surely it would work if he did it. So with that he looked at them both from his chair. Yet this had rather the opposite effect, as the left one spoke up aggravated. "Are you lame in the head? Move or I will replace your teeth with stones," while placing his hand on the pommel of his sword, clearly just looking for a fight. Just as Naruto was about to take out his own weapon, he suddenly heard the angry yell of a girl on the other side of the tavern, which caused all the sound to stop in the tavern. "Oi, you fray bastard, are looking for a fight?" When she said that, all three boys already stood on their feet with their hands on their pommels in case of an fight. Yet not only them, but several men in the inn started to ready themselves as well. Naruto looked at the other table with an raised brow before raising his hand. "I do not think anyone is looking for a fight." As he said that, he would stand up and placed a hand on the shoulder of one of the now identified as Frey men. "Right?" Yet that got a different reaction, as the attention was now back at him again and the Frey man lashed out at him with his fist. Yet all he was met with was air before hit fist would hit a wooden pillar that would keep the building standing. Earning a loud crack from his hand, the man was about to shout out in pain, yet was silenced when his stomach was met with a swift knee of Naruto, causing the man to bubble over and fall flat on the floor. Seeing his comrade fall on the floor in defeat, the second Frey man was about to pull out his sword, yet was stopped when Naruto quickly kicked the pommel of the sword that was still halfway in its sheath and forced the man to twist around. Yet not even being able to finish the twist due to the man being tripped over by the boot of Naruto, leading to the man falling on top of his comrade. With both of them now on the ground and groaning loudly, Naruto stood above of them and kicked the one on top of the other against his side, causing him to roll off his friend and face the roof. Yet Naruto's face appeared before him. Not saying a word, the man waited for the still cloaked boy to speak. "You mind taking another table?" With that, Naruto sat down on his own old spot, with some people looking more cautiously at him. Yet the 4 teens around his age looked at him with a mix of a smile of delight and a face of surprise, as they expected him to just be some boy about to be beaten down by some Frey soldiers. Not paying any of them any mind, Naruto started to continue with his dinner, not caring in the slightest about the stares. At least that is what he showed on the inside. He was slapping himself multiple times as he straight off blew any chance of not causing any suspicion. His berating of himself was interrupted, yet this time by one of the boys that was part of the 4 teens. He seemed like the eldest of the 4 and spoke out, "Who are you, and where did you learn something like that?" As he did not get any reaction from the cloaked blonde at the start, he was about to ask again, yet stopped when he finally got a reply. "I am Naruto Uzumaki. As for where I learned that, let's say is secret." "And you might be?" spoke out the blonde, now looking at him, which gave the boy a chance to get a better look at him, which revealed him to have blue eyes and a far younger face than he expected. He was around his own age. "I am Brandon Stark, heir to Winterfell." As he said that, he gained a bit of a puff in his chest at the pride he felt of his family. Turning around, he waved his left arm to the 3 other teens. He spoke out, "These are my brothers and sister, Ned, Lyanna and Benjen Stark." At that, Naruto gave his nod and spoke out, "A pleasure. Would you like to join us at the table?" This was said by the girl of the 4 teens, which got a raised brow from the 4 teens. Neither of them really expected for the girl to invite the mysterious guy to sit with them. I could not see the harm in that, yet only if all of you are sure. I have no wish to intrude. Yet that was quickly declined by Brandon, as he almost dragged the blonde to their table. While he was and still is suspicious about the cloaked blonde, he did admire his skill and the way he took down those frays. As he hated every single fray to the death. In his new seat the blonde looked at all four of them now a bit better. The first one he looked at had the darkest hair of all three of them, which was the youngest. While he did seem like the rather shy type, he had a certain shine in his eyes. The second one was Brandon. The way he spoke and stood screamed out at what kind of man he is, a rather brutish rough man with a hot-headed mind. Yet hidden in him was kindness and honor. Yet for that you should be a close friend to him to receive, Naruto thought. The third was the silent one of the four. He had brown hair, while he looked like a proud and smart man. Naruto just did not know what else to make of him, as his outward appearance did not betray a lot about him. Finally, the last of the four, the girl. She had light brown hair with a beautiful face, yet unlike most girls she seemed to hold some fierceness in her eyes, as it almost seemed that he was looking in the eyes of a wild wolf. Along with that, she seemed rather headstrong, hot-tempered and willful. Yet he was brought out of his identifying of the four when a fifth member joined the group. He had a small beard yet was rather tall. He had 2 tankards in his hands while drunkenly walking to the 4 Starks and 1 Uzumaki. "Ned, ye bastard, come and drink with me a bit more." Yet Ned shook his head and said, "I have had enough, Robert. I think you should also take a bit less." At that, Robert walked toward the table and took a seat rather close to Liana. Leaning against her, he spoke out, "Liana, come and drink with me." Yet while he spoke he was hanging half the way over her, nearly pouring the content of his tankard over her. Yet just as Naruto was about to push the man a bit off the now uncomfortable girl, she did it herself and shoved the Baratheon off her while glaring at her. "Fuck off, Robert, you are drunk, again." Smiling slightly at the girl, Naruto almost had a vision of the past, yet instead of Liana sitting there it was Sakura. Shaking his head at his memory, he turned to the Stark host. Thinking it might be a bit rude to keep that cowl on his head, he would remove it over his head, exposing his blonde hair, blue eyes and whisker marks to the world. The rest of the night was filled with the Starks getting to know the blonde teen, while Robert had gone back to the bartender demanding for more drink before disappearing upstairs with a random girl. While after a while of their conversation it finally got to the point that they asked him what he was planning on his way south. In full honesty, he did not see a reason to lie to them and told them the truth. That he wished to win the tournament and then buy a large scrap of land to make his home at. With that said, he left the 4 Starks alone as he retreated to his chamber for the night. Next morning, after waking from his slumber, Naruto looked out the window. It seemed that the sun was just about to rise and that it was early in the morning. Wishing to get on the path quickly, he quickly got dressed with the wooden cowl once again over his head. It seemed that below it was empty, as there was no one but a few sleeping drunks, and a sleeping barmaid. While outside there stood only one guard, while the other was sleeping presumably in the barn. Already walking away from the inn, Naruto started to rush off again. Only one day of running and he should reach the castle ruins of Harrenhal. Once there he would join the melee and see what other contest would be there. The jousting, while he did want to join it, he did not have a horse nor a thick plated armor. So his plan? He was planning to win as many contests, and with some luck he might actually get a horse with some scrap armor and join the joust, as that did pay the most. Yet for now he had a path to run through to actually get there. Nightfall. While Naruto was running on the road, he suddenly stopped as he heard the sound of shouting and the clashing of metal. Turning his head to the sound, he sees a fire off the road where 7 men stood with 5 of them facing 2. Rushing towards the group of people, he found that the 2 men were dressed in rather rich armor, as one had golden-plated armor while a white cloak would hang on his shoulders. While beside him stood a blonde teen around his own age. Both of them had their swords drawn to the other 5 people. The other 5 were dressed in plated armor themselves, yet their armor was more dirty, while in their hands they had rather crude weapons. While one had a castle-forged sword, one held a large mace. One had a shield with a hatchet in his hands, while the last 2 held spears. All of them looking rather threatening towards the 2 men. Yet only 20 seconds of rushing towards them, he already noticed that out the woods more men showed up. All dressed like the 5 other men. Now with their joined force that numbered around 15. And with their now joined force a fight broke out between them. With the boy after killing 2 men was brought to the ground with the man with a large mace holding it over his head ready to slam it into the head of the now defenseless teen. While the man in golden armor was in a locked combat with 5 others and seemed to hold his ground but was slowly losing it with more moving towards him. As it seemed the man could hold his own for now, Naruto finally made one final jump and had Glamdring drawn, throwing the sword into the back of the man with the mace. Once the man fell down on the ground clearly dead, Naruto quickly took out his sword from the dead man and started to slaughter men left and right, bringing them down like they were straw men. With only 10 of their own men left, the bandits quickly made their escape back into the woods, yet not without losing 5 more men to the strikes of both Naruto and the man in gold. Their foes now gone, Naruto turned to the downed teen and reached out his hand from him to take it while he spoke out. "Are you alright?" Earning a nod from the teen, Naruto pulled him up once he grasped his hand. Now on his feet, the teen looked at the cloaked Naruto before his gaze turned to the pile of dead men around them. Yet his thoughts quickly disappeared when he heard the voice of the man in golden armor speak to him. "Jamie, are you alright?" Earning a nod from the teen, the man turned to the cloaked teen. "You have my thanks, without you we might not have made it. I am happy to help. I only saw a group of men attacking too, so I decided to help you all out," spoke the cloaked blonde. "So who are you two?" With that the man smiled. "Apologies, this here is Jaime Lannister, son of Tywin Lannister. I am Sir Arthur Dayne, of the King's Guard. Who are you, my friend?" "Naruto Uzumaki. So why did they attack you?" While they might not know the answer, he still wanted to ask. "Well, in the full truth, we were the ones that attacked them. They are part of a band of outlaws called the Kingswood Brotherhood. They are wanted men as they have been kidnapping some nobles and maidens. We were here to hunt them down." "I see. Well, I am happy to help the 2 of you out when I could. Say, would you mind if I take one of the armor plating of these men?" While it did sound strange, the man spoke up. "I do not mind, yet why?" "Well, I will need the armor as I am planning to compete in the tournament of Harren Hall, and at the moment what I got, well, it would not stop any blows of a blade or spear." Gaining a glint in his eyes, Jaime spoke out. "Well then, come with us to Harren Hall, we are going there either way. And as a sign of thanks for saving my life and helping us out, I am sure we could pay for you a fresh set of armor." Smiling at the rather generous offer, Naruto was about to decline, yet then stopped himself. He saw no reason to decline such an offer. Besides, these suits of armor on the fallen men might not even be his size, so who is he to decline it? So cleaning his now blood-covered blade on the cloak of one of the dead men, he nodded and spoke out. "Well, if you insist." Smiling at that, all 3 men made their way south on the road, soon to reach Harren Hall. Standing in front of a blacksmith, Naruto has his arms crossed while smiling lightly. In front of him stood Jaime Lannister speaking with the blacksmith. While the man did agree on selling Naruto a suit of plate armor, yet he tried to increase the price on the Lannister. Yet it seems that the haggling has ended, as Jaime smiled and patted the man on his shoulder and walked back to Naruto. The blacksmith seemed rather down. Clearly he did not manage to increase the price. "Well, he has a few suits of armor that would match your size, so look at them and see which one you want," he spoke out with a smile. Naruto in return shook his head and spoke out. "While I do not wish to offend you for giving this, but I do not wish to seem greedy." Yet Jaime only shook his head while speaking out. "You, while I had to admit it, that you saved from death. So this is the least I can give. Now then, I am needed, please do not try to get into trouble." He spoke out while smiling, clapping Naruto on his shoulder, which earned him his own pat on his shoulder from the fellow blonde. Walking into the blacksmithy, he would look around for a short moment before the large man approached him. "The suits of armor are over there, pick one and get out. I have much to take care of." With that the man returned to his work on hitting the hot metal on an anvil with a hammer, shaping it into the hoe of a horse. Shaking his head at the uncaring man, Naruto moved to the back of the small shop and stood now in front of 3 suits of armor. The first armor suit on the left was a Gothic suit of armor, with a chest plate that held some ribbles inside of it to give it some style, while the ribbles curved from the navel to the arms, giving it an exotic look. While it held tight shoulder pads with upper arm guards attached to it with 2 leather strips. At the uncovered part of the upper arm there was just some cloth indicating that it would be unprotected. Its handguards were made to warp around the whole hand while also giving it wrist guards. While it would protect him, he would not move as fast as he liked with his hands. With the suit there was also the leggings and boots. These were some simple in design and were not too hard to move with. The helmet was a fully covered helmet that only had two small horizontal lines at the eyes to give him room to see, while there was a small amount of opened holes at the mouth for him to breathe through. Moving his gaze to the next armor suit, it looked like in Milanese armor. The chest plate was clearly a lot larger than the past one, while also giving it a bit more of a belly. Its shoulder guards were a lot broader, while its arm guards covered the whole arm except the inside of the elbow. Its leggings were mostly chainmail, while just above the knees the plating returned. Its helmet had a bucket figure, yet its visor was a large T-shape. While the last armor set was just a large vest of chainmail over the whole body, including the hands having chainmail mittens. Its legs had also chainmail. Yet around the chest there was a thick layer of leather with metal dots over it, indicating that it would work just as well as any other suit of armor with fighting someone with a slashing weapon. As a helmet it had a round helmet with a strip of metal forming a wedge vertical downwards and back up, giving him a good sight around him. At the middle of the visor there was a metal strip going downwards past the wedge, indicating that it was to protect the user's nose. While at its ears were two flaps of plate and chainmail at the neck. Looking over each piece of armor, Naruto shook his head. While each had their charm and use, they also had a lot of weaknesses. Turning his head back to the blacksmith that was hammering away, he gained a slight glint. Clearly the Lannister had paid more than enough gold for the man to ever get for these suits combined so quickly. He would take the plate of the first armor set along with the leggings and gloves of the second one. Lastly, he would take the helmet of the last set and nod to himself. While it might seem odd, it would work. So putting the suits in a large clothed bag and slinging it over his back, Naruto gave his goodbye to the man, yet he did not seem to pay any attention at all. Back outside he looked around him. Many people were walking around while also looking around at everything that is going on. The usual rubbled castle known as Harrenhal was filled with live joy and excitement. Young children with wooden swords running around while playfully hitting one another. While the more adult of people were either shopping the different wares the shops had to offer. The rich merchants bought and dealed with different salesmen, while other would-be tournament winners were browsing the shops and blacksmith to find a way for them to have a great chance on winning the upcoming tournament. Moving through the crowded streets with a large sack on his shoulder, Naruto tried to find a place to rest before the tournament would start. Yet while he was walking through the streets, he was so taken away at the many things around him that he failed to notice the body he was about to collide with. Falling on his rear, Naruto would groan lightly while rubbing his rear in pain. As he was about to tell the person off about this, he sadly let the words fall dry in his mouth when he noticed the now as well fallen person on the ground. The woman in front of him had long dark hair, an olive-colored skin, and when her eyes opened, Naruto could see the pained black eyes. Quickly getting up, Naruto tried to help her up while stuttering out at his own stupidity. "I am sorry, miss, I must have missed you there." Yet the hand that was about to reach her was stopped by a sharp sword just at the wrist, while at his neck was another blade. Both the wielders were men in golden armor, with a white cloak on their back. The first man was large in stature, even towering over the already decent-sized Naruto. While the second man had, just like the woman, olive-colored skin and dark hair. Yet he held a pair of light brown eyes with a clear glare on his facial features. "How dare you?" Yet just before the man could continue with his words, he was stopped by an elbow in his chest. While it did not injure him at all, he did feel the blow through the thick plated steel, sending him back quickly, while the man that had a sword at his wrist now found his sword crossed with the blade of Naruto. Yet just as both Naruto and the large man were about to trade blows, and the olive-colored man was about to join in, they were stopped by the sound of the woman's fair voice, that was hit on the ground, that now stood on her feet. "Halt!" At her command, both men withdrew their blades and placed the tips on the soil of the ground while looking at the woman. "This man has not greatly offended me, Sir Gerald, uncle. So there is no reason to fight." Yet the large man spoke, "Princess T." Yet he was silenced by her again as she spoke. "Gerald, there is no need." Turning her eyes to the blonde, who had now lowered the blade and slowly returned back into his scabbard. Now that she stood, Naruto could see her features a lot better. The woman was fair in voice as she was in natural beauty. She was dressed in an orange garb that covered her body up yet still did show off her curves. Shaking his head, Naruto quickly put on a rather goofy expression while rubbing the back of his head. Hee hee. Sorry about that, I did not see you. While around him all the people looked baffled at him how his show of disrespect to the woman in front of him. The woman herself could only give a faint smile while chuckling. It is all right, I am not harmed, besides I was standing in the middle of the road. Tell me, who are you? Smiling, Naruto bows his head quickly before raising it again and speaks out. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, at your service. While he said his name, she gained a slight confused expression of the strange last name, yet quickly shook it away with a small shake of her head. Smiling at the man, she nodded her head and spoke out. I thank you for your name, please do not be insulted by my two guards here. They tend to be rather protective. I am Princess Alia Martel. Naruto's eyes widen at the revelation of the person in front of him and already started to beat himself mentally. Ah, damn it, Naruto. You managed to knock over the princess, great. I guess I should be lucky to still be here and not in chains. Ah, I see. Sorry again about that, princess. He finished lamely with a rub to the back of his head. I do have to go now, so, have a good day? All he wanted is to get away from this pressure of these people around him that looked as if they already see a dead man walking. Of course, do not let me hold you back. Have a good day. She finished with a smile at him before moving on with the two guards following her, yet still sending threatening glares to Naruto. While behind the three walked another woman. She had long black hair and was tall yet still smaller than Naruto. As she turns her head to look at the blonde, she sent a slight amused smile to him with a wink. She had violet eyes with a beautiful smile on her cheeks. If Naruto would have to guess, she would be her handmaiden or something along those lines. Yet compared to outward looks, she might as well have been the princess when looking at her. Once she turned back to the three people walking on, Naruto would quickly pick up the pack and look at the random small folk looking at him like he were some kind of otherworldly being, which he might or might not be. What are you all looking at? He shouted, which caused the small folk to turn around and go about their business. Shaking his head, Naruto grumbled and made his way through the streets. Back with the royal party, the princess was walking next to the black-haired woman. Turning to her, she spoke out. He was quite an interesting person. Do you not think so, Ashara? Smiling back at the princess, she spoke out. Indeed, it almost seemed like he did not even know who you were, which is surprising by itself. Not only that, but as was quite handsome. She finished a bit more to herself, smiling slightly. The princess simply raises her right eyebrow with a slight smirk on her cheeks. Easy there, Ashara, or I might get the implication you would fall for someone not of high birth. With that, they moved on with the two Kingsguard following behind them, being the ever-loyal guard dogs of the royal party. That evening, laying down on a branch of a tree just off the border of the tourney grounds was Naruto, while the large cotton bag filled with the armor is hanging from another branch beside him. Sighing lightly, Naruto smiled while looking up at the sky. For some reason, the cloudless night sky in this world had a lot more stars. Well, that is if he is in another world. For all he knows, he can be in the future. Shaking his head, he would return his thoughts on the night sky, while recounting the things he did this night. First there was the arrival and all, getting his armor, and of course nearly getting executed for bumping into royalty. Well, he only had his luck to thank for not being slaughtered. Then again, it was his bad luck that brought him into those situations. While after that he had made his way through the market and the stands before finally ending up at the tourney grounds. There he had signed his name in for the melee. While he was tempted to enter the archery contest, he himself had to admit that he was no archer. Now was it throwing shurikens or kunais, he would without a doubt sign in and win. Lastly there was the jousting, and while he was tempted, he needed a horse, which he does not have. Yet the jousting would take place 2 days after the melee, so maybe he could be lucky and buy a horse and sign in for the jousting. Lastly, he had tried to find a tavern willing to take him in, yet, for some reason they all rejected him to sleep as every bed was taken. So now he was outside sleeping on a tree. Not that he minded really. The open air and open sky reminds him of the past adventures he would have as a genin. Shaking his head away from the past, he manages to close his eyes and slowly let slumber creep closer. Yet when he suddenly heard the sound of a boot hitting the wet grass below, he blinked his eyes open and looked down, finding a dirty-looking man with only one eye, while with not a single hair on his head. His clothing are ripped with mud and most likely feces over it. The man seems to look up at the tree himself, or more specifically at Naruto and his bag. Yet when Naruto his gaze falls on him he would stop his motion and stand frozen like a statue while only his mouth would slowly creep into a innocent smile showing that he was missing a good amount of teeth. As none of them spoke Naruto seems to be the one to throw the silence away and blurted out. Can I help you? Yet the man hurriedly shakes his head while speaking out. No, young man. I was only looking for a tree to piss against. I shall find another one. With that he hurriedly made his escape while Naruto scoffs. It was quite clear what he intended on doing. Take his armor and anything of value. Yet he was no fool, nor really bloodthirsty, so he lets the man go with a slap on the wrist. He just hopes that he did not make a mistake letting that man slip away while he could stop him. Closing his eyes again, Naruto slowly started to finally return to the compounds of his heart that keeps hitting his chest over and over in a calm fashion. Tomorrow would be the melee, so he would need that sleep. Yet even before his mind falls back into slumber he would retell his plan if he wins. Well, he was certain he would win. After all, these people did not even have a shred of chakra. After winning, try to win the tourney of jousting, to get more fame than money. After that, buy his own lands and set his own home near, and of course keep it open for those that would ever need help. Then again he should watch out with who he would invite. For all he knows he might lose half of his things once he lets random people into his home to spend the night to rest up. Finally, the last thoughts were of him maybe starting a family and end up with a wife that would love him for who he was, while also having a few kids. Gods, he would love to have a son, yet a daughter was even better. The thing with sons is that they would always try to outdo their father, and while he wants to deny it he knows that he could not make promises for which he knows nothing, as he might get jealous of his son. Yet his daughter would always be the light in his heart and life. With those thoughts Naruto falls asleep with a slight smile on his face. Yet even in sleep he would keep his mind awake and his sword close. After all, while the war back in the ninja world would teach him things and always to be on edge, he only spent a small amount of time in it. Still, from the small amount of time he learned more than he actually wanted to ever learn. Next morning, opening his eyes early in the morning, Naruto looks around. Around him people were setting up the final preparations for the tourney. Small folk were building up the final stages, railings and such to fulfill the desires of their lord and maybe even get a slight reward for their excellent work. Sliding off the tree branch, Naruto would jump up slightly to loosen his legs before stretching his back and arms to fully wake up. While he loved to sleep in the open sky, sleeping on a tree had its issues. After he had landed, some people looked and pointed at him, before slowly returning back to their work. After all, to them he was the weird blonde that slept in a tree without even falling off. Walking around for only a short moment, Naruto arrived at a line of people that started as a table with a man on a chair scribbling away, while it ended not too far from Naruto his own location. Walking towards the end of the line, Naruto looks in front of him at the rather over-equipped people standing there, poking the man in front of him on his shoulder, which caused him to turn around and face the blonde. Raising his brow at the blonde, he spoke up. What? Smiling at the large man, Naruto spoke out. This is the line to sign yourself up in the tournament, right? The man sized the blonde up before laughing out loud. This is the line for it indeed, yet you better find something else to do. A boy like you will not hold out more than 1 second in the grounds. Glaring back at the man, Naruto spoke out. I might not be the eldest of you old folk, but I can still beat all of you without breaking a sweat. While it was common for most people to act more aggressive in return, this man merely smiled while laughing louder. I like your guts, kid, go ahead and sign up. Yet do not try to shame yourself and your family when you piss yourself. With that he turned around as it was finally his turn to sign up. After the man apparently called John had signed himself up, it was finally Naruto's turn. Walking forward, he looked at a bald man on a chair while looking at Naruto. Name, age and what you want to participate in. Naruto Uzumaki, 18 and in the melee. He finished while the man scribbled away. The melee, a kid like you? Should you not try the archery? A kid like you would do a lot better there than in a place for veterans, asked the man. Yet Naruto only shook his head. Well, if you insist. The melee starts in 3 hours. You better start to prepare your underwear, kid. With that the man shouted out for the next one, while Naruto makes his way to the tree again. What is it with the piss jokes by all these people? Now standing in front of the tree, Naruto started to place his armor on his body. Yet mid-placing his armor on his body, a group of small children were all looking at him with wide eyes, which caused the blonde Uzumaki to frown slightly before speaking out. Yes? Yet none of them reacted, they merely looked at the knight placing on his armor. Shaking his head, he returns to placing the armor on his body, yet as he got to a few pieces of plating at his back, he did not seem to be able to reach the leather strappings on his sides. After a good minute of struggling, he sighed deeply before his gaze fell back on the group of kids that had suddenly increased from 7 to 20. It was almost as if he was a damn showcase for those kids. Looking at the oldest, which he presumes to be around 12, he would speak out. "Hey you kid, mind helping me?" The kid at first would step back a bit in fear before Naruto mentioned to the straps on his sides. Slowly approaching the blonde, he would place the traps shut, keeping the heavy plating around the blonde's chest. With the playing now around his chest, Naruto smiled at the kid that now looked at him still with wide eyes. "Hey, thanks for the help." With that, he walks off towards the tourney grounds, making his way through the waiting pit. Already some people were there preparing their weapon. Sitting down, Naruto would draw his own blade and look over the white steel, admiring the craftsmanship of his home before looking at the open grounds of the tourney. Already people started to find a spot to watch the melee, while some people of higher birth were on the high-end stage to show their rank and class over the small folk. After an hour passes, more and more people would enter the stages and the railing to watch the soon-to-be battle. While inside the pit, more and more men entered to show their fighting skill and win the prize. A loud horn sounded through the air, causing the 5 people at the entrance to walk into the grounds and raise their already drawn weapons, roaring at the cheering people to give them a bit of a show. More and more people start to fill inside the grounds. Along with them was the blonde Uzumaki, now with the helmet on his head hiding his identity to the people around him, while his sword was at his side. Around the helmeted blonde stood at least 50 people, all in a group looking at the stage. On the stage sat in the middle an old man with long hair, disgusting long curled nails, while his skin was pale and withered. On each side stood 2 men in golden armor and white cloaks with their hands on their swords. The crown on the man in poor state was a clear sign that he was apparently the king. In Naruto's mind, he had to think that this man was rather disgusting in his appearance and had no show of power. If it were his world, he would have taken from power long ago. Yet he could not judge. Along the rows of seats sat more people, all of high status. Some people he even recalled meeting before. Like the princess he bumped into last day, sitting on the leftmost closest seat near the king with 1 Kingsguard beside her, while on her other side was the girl that was with her. While a bit more in the distance, he recognized the Stark party. With not too far off the Stark part sat Jamie beside an older man, yet still showing a lot of his prime. Above them a red banner hung with a golden lion on top of it. On the rightmost closest seat sat a young man around Naruto his age with silver hair and purple eyes, while next to him sat an older man. The older man finally stood up while holding up his hand to the crowd, asking for silence. "My lords, my ladies, I thank you all for coming to the humble tourney of Harrenhal presented by House Went. I feel honored by the amount of people and families that have arrived here this day." Yet Naruto started to tune him out and simply looks around the people that he will be fighting soon. Many looked like veterans, and if he is to win, he was sure I would use some charka. Not only that, but if he would win easily, that might be beneficial to him. Crossing his arms, he looks back up at the Lord of House Went and started to listen again to his words. "And with that, I wish to start this mighty combat." Lowering his hand, the sound of horns sound over the field, and soon the warriors take their places to get some distance between their enemy. Naruto himself draws his sword, causing it to give a soft sound from its unsheathing until the white blade is held in his right hand while his left hand is open, preparing for the upcoming combat. And with that the horns sounded again, and so the combat begins. Standing on the dirt-covered ground, Naruto would look at his opponent while holding Glamdring above his head, readying himself to either strike or deflect from his opponent's blade. The enemy he faces would have sweat covering his brow as he had to give his full effort to keep his gaze on Naruto, and not on the trail of destruction he left. The moment the horns sounded, the young blonde drew out his sword and started to beat foe after foe. While he did not kill a single one, he did break some arms' bones, and overall managed to cut the blade from a sword itself, leaving his opponent only with a broken blade in its hilt. And now the blonde stood in front of him. Naruto seemed to wait for the man to attack, Luckily eventually he finally attacks Naruto and was quickly brought down by a deflected swipe of the blade and then a plated boot to the right leg. While not breaking the sword, the man hit the ground and earned a painful kick to the side of his head, rendering him out of the match. With that, Naruto would look around smiling at the almost empty arena around him. Only a few fighters are remaining within the battle. Luckily for him, they seem to be locked in their own combat and are not focusing on him right now. Another good thing was the fact that the crowd seemed to like his performance a lot as they kept cheering for him. Then again, they did not know his name, so instead he was named by one of the men, suddenly declaring to call him the Unnamed. With that, the whole crowd started to chant his given name. While the Unnamed did seem rather edgy in his mind and he even had to cringe mid-swing when they started to chant it, he got over it fast enough. And hey, if they wanted to call him that, who was he to stop them from that? Besides, he wanted to get his name out there. The plan was simple: get a name, gold, buy his land, enrich in the land and rule his own place, and no one would stand in his way. Then again, he could right away use his chakra, but what challenge was in that? No, he would use it more on the lands he would own than his enemies. Unless of course they annoyed the shit out of him. After all, they may call him Nameless right now, or as they call it, the Unnamed. Yet when he wins this, he will let them know his name. Better having them shout his actual name than this damn name. The fight continued, and without much surprise from either Naruto nor the crowd due the indication of their non-stop chanting, did Naruto beat the last man and was the final man standing. Now with the combat over, Naruto look around the crowd, both noble and low-born, were standing in their seats clapping and cheering his name. I might as well milk this out a little. Naruto thought before raising his sword glamdring into the air he would let out a mighty roar, earning a loud cheer from the people. Turning to the royal booth, he found both the royal family and in the booth next to the royal family the Lord of Harrenhal. While preparing to give a speech for their winner, he was stopped before he could start by the king himself as he shakenly stood on her feet. Well fought, well fought. Your skill in battle have truly amused me, yet I wish to know the name of our winner. As he said that, he pointed his old hands with long ugly curled nails towards Naruto. Stepping forward, Naruto would stick glamdring in the ground and fall on his right knee. After all, he was addressing royalty, no need to make a big fuss for nothing. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, Your Grace. As he shouted that, many people seemed rather confused. Naruto was a weird name, but Uzumaki is not a house anybody has ever heard of, neither in Westeros nor in Essos. Then again, he might be from the Far East for all they knew. While some common folk had a last name, they tend to never see any use to use it, as they tend to only talk with people from the village they are born in. The king himself would keep his gaze on the blonde. For a moment in his eyes many things could be seen: confusion, insanity, fear of those around him. Yet after a bit of a longer moment gazing at the Uzumaki, the king would seem calm, almost as if his lover embraced his form, telling him all would be well. The king himself, that usually heard the many voices in his head whisper and taunt his mind, telling him to kill this lord, burn that person, now were simply quiet. They did not say a thing. This both soothed and terrified the king. The voices in his mind, his masters, were silenced all when the Uzumaki spoke. Not even a minute ago during the battle the voices spoke in glee at the battle that took place. Yet now they were as silent as a dead corpse. What manner of person could this blonde soldier be that stopped the voices? Did he even stop the voices? Yet now, with his mind not being filled with the voices, the king did not know what to say. For so long did they not tee him that he barely had a mind of his own. So the king simply stood there in silence while all those around him looked at him. That was until Lord Went stood up and spoke out loudly. Well, congratulations Naruto Uzumaki, the champion of the melee of Harrenhal. Step forward and your price shall be given. With that, Naruto stepped forward towards the tribunes while the king's guard stood on each side of the king. They simply held their hands on their hilts while looking at the approaching blonde. Stepping up some stairs until he stood slightly below the lord of house, when they had a large coffer placed in his hand containing the promised price of 3,000 golden dragons. Taking the price, he placed it down on the stairs before bowing his head to the lord, before turning to the king and bowed down his head. With that done, he once again picked up the chest of gold and started to leave the tribunes while the crowd was cheering his name in glee at his victory. Once he was off the stairs, he started to make his way to the exit, yet stopped in his tracks once he heard the loud shout of the king. Halt! Echoing through the field. At his shout everyone got silent, not one person speaking, only listening to what their king might have to say. Some started to fear that the king would order the poor blonde's death for no reason other than that the voices as he claimed told him. Yet instead he asked something different. "Shall you attend the joust, young Naruto?" Rather confused, Naruto turns to the king and speaks out loudly. "I believe not, as I do not possess the required equipment to attend in such a sport." Yet at that the king waved his hand. "No matter, your equipment shall be given to you. On the cost of the royal coffers." As he said that, Naruto was unsure how to respond to such a generous gift by the king. While the people started to cheer. Not just for the blonde but also for their king. Speaking in joy of how the king cared for the lower folk and not just the privileged few in court. "I shall grant you this under one condition. You shall represent the king in this tourney, do you accept?" Looking at the king before around him at the many people simply cheering while some tried to shush some of the people cheering so they could hear the blonde's answer, the Uzumaki fell on his right knee and bowed his head. "If you wish for me to represent you at this tourney, then I shall." With that the many people erupted in an even louder cheer booming through the tribunes and sides. A single wave of the king was a clear sign that it was agreed upon and that Naruto could depart. While many were confused why the king would do this, there was one person that glared at the king in annoyance and worry. The eyes belonged to the crown prince himself. "What are you playing at, father?" Had his father found out? He arrived at the tourney unexpected. He wanted to convince high noble lords to turn their coat and support him to overthrow his father. Yet his father's arrival had ruined that plan, and now his father named this blonde man going by the name of Naruto as his representative and, in other words, champion of the joust. While the prince would not have his answer, the king heard only one thing. The whispers once again in his head soothing him, telling him he does well. Yes, name him champion, he shall bring forth the truth of this world. Under his hand all our enemies shall burn together. At that the king could only smile, no kind or comforted smile but a crazed wicked smile at the retreating back of the blonde. Standing in front of a large tent right now, Naruto was faced with two men. Both wore the golden armor and white cloak of the king's guard. While he stood there, in his armor, sword at his side in its sheath, if he was not mistaken one of the guards was named Lewin Martell. If he was right, he took it that he was related to Princess Elia Martell. While the other man on the other side of the entrance was Esser Baristan Selmy. While he did not know much of that man, he heard those few rumors of him partaking in the soon-to-be jousting. Those talks tended to end with a man or woman referring to one of his past deeds. One of which was that he saved the king when he was captured by an house that decided to rebel against the king. Naruto himself simply stood there smiling while both men did not show any emotion. They did what a guard was supposed to. Guard the king and not strike a conversation. Yet Naruto now stood almost for 20 minutes outside the tent waiting for the allowed entry of the Lord Commander of the king's guard himself. While he understood that he could not just barge in like this, he found it simply a waste of time waiting out here. Inside the tent was the king himself with his Lord Commander Esser Gerald Hightower. The king simply stood there beside the king, while he himself was on a large chair holding his head. The voices spoke to him, filling his mind, telling him to grant the Uzumaki entry, yet his own fear was shouting at him as well. That fear he felt when he was a prisoner of Duskendale. Only later did he realize, after his promise to the blonde, that he simply carved his way through dozens of people without as much as an effort. What was to stop him from attacking the king? Yet eventually it seemed that finally the voices won over his fear, and he looked at the Lord Commander of his king's guard and only gave him a small nod. With that, Esser Hightower made his way to the entrance of the tent and told Naruto he could enter. Naruto, relieved at last, tried to make his way inside only to be stopped by one of the king's guard holding out his hand. "Your sword, Esser." Looking at the man, Naruto reluctantly started to take off the blade from his waistline and held the blade sheathed and all to Esser Selmy. "I want that back later." The knight taking the blade gave the blonde a single nod before stepping out of the way. With that, Naruto made his way inside of the tent. Inside of the tent it was rather dark, yet he could still see through the sun hitting the walls of the tent. Sitting on a large chair behind a table was the king himself, and next to him stood the Lord Commander once again. "You called for me to meet you here, your grace?" As he said that, he looked at the old king and he simply nodded his head and pointed at the smaller chair on the other side of the table. "Sit, we must talk." With that, made his way to the chair and sat down in front of the king while placing his elbows on top of the wooden table, looking at the king. "I hope you understand that me naming you as my champion I this tourney will make a lot rely on you." For one, you shall now fight for the honor of the royal family. You shall protect it. Yet there is another thing, I named you so." With that the king grew silent and simply stared at the blonde. In the meanwhile, Naruto was doing what he has been doing ever since he won the battle of the melee and gained the king's praise. Berating himself silently in his mind. "Good job, the king of all people, now expect all of this of you. Problem is, I never fucking jousted. Hell, I only know what it is because I saw 2 knights joust only once while I was here." Yet as the king's silence, the blonde opened his mouth and slowly spoke out with a bit of hesitance. "And that would be, it is to win this tourney and stop whatever my son is planning. He along with the Lord of House Went has started this tourney for a reason and I must know why. You will win, that is what is expected of you. If you win, I shall also reward you with a large patch of land. Maybe even name you Lord of a Holdfast." At that the Uzumaki was silent for a moment. Going along with this plan would mean that he would gain a lot of things that he would no longer would have to pay for. "And if I fail, if I am beaten in the joust?" asked the blonde. At that the king stood and started to rant in a rather maddening manner. "Yes, what if he fails? What then?" He looked frantically at the ceiling of the tent, almost like the tent itself was speaking to him. At this the blonde could only turn his gaze to his Lord Commander, yet the Lord Commander simply stood there, as if this was common. But this should not be common, not for anyone, especially of a king. A man with this weak of a mind could only cause death and destruction on his people. Then again, he was the king. For now he could only see how it turns out. "If you fail, then you shall get nothing. But I shall find out what is going on either through your actions or through the web of a spider." With that the king took a deep breath and seemed to relax a bit more. "Now the horse and a full set of armor along with lances bearing the royal seagull are ready for you in the tent Sir Selmy shall guide you to." With that the king waved his hand at the blonde and he made his leave. Yet unnoticed, or just not caring, the blonde hand not bow to the king. Yet the king did not seem to care in the slightest, or was in such a heated debate with himself to not notice. Now walking alongside the king's guards Selmy, they made their way to a rather small tent that was pure black in color and held a single red star on top. While walking the king's guard handed Naruto his sword back. "You fought well in the melee, Sir Uzumaki. I must ask, have you fought in many battles and wars?" While securing the hilt to his waist the blonde turned to the king's guard. While he himself wanted to loudly proclaim to the world that it speaks, he decided for the better and calmly answered beside him. "I fought in many fights and battles. As for a war, I only fought in one real war." As he said that, Naruto gained a slight haunted look in his gaze. The memory of fighting against Obito. The haunted memory that all they cared about at HTAT moment to kill one another. Even though exhausted, they tried to make their way over the pile of dead bodies that belonged to other shinobi. In the end they fought on top of the bodies. Some would even say they fought over death itself. "I see, so where might you hail from? The east, I presume?" At that Baristan only gained a single nod from the blonde before they were about to reach the tent. Yet both halted when a soft voice spoke out. "Sir Baristan." Turning around, Naruto looked at the king's guard as he quickly bowed his head down. The woman had silver, white hair, a fair face, and a silver crown on her head that held white jewels. The woman, while past her youth, still seemed to hold a lot of grace from her youth. "My queen," spoke the king's guard. Naruto quickly followed suit of the king's guard example. While these customs still remained strange to him, he would play nice for now. After all, back home while the lords were rich, they did not hold this amount of respect within the hidden villages. Yes, they paid but did not lead. Commander took care of the villages. They simply decided on investments of their own choosing. After all, they were only refined traders to begin with. Beside the queen stood another king's guard. This one Naruto did remember Arthur Dane from the night he aided him along with his squire against those would-be bandits. Of course the man was now acting as her guard. "I see you are bringing my husband's champion to his equipment?" she asked while speaking, though she did keep her gaze locked on the blonde almost as if she was inspecting him. "I am your grace. He is to prepare before the jousting shall start." "I see. Well, Sir Uzumaki, please when you are done visit me in my tent, as I wish to grant you as the wife of the king my favor." With that she bowed her head ever so slightly. Naruto in return repeated his bow, but this one seemed more like a weird nod. Just to let her know he has received the message, he speaks out. "I shall, your grace. I should not be too long." With that she gave a small smile before departing with the guard and a few handmaidens in tow. Naruto turned to Esir Baristan as he opened the tent flaps and motions within the tent. In here you will find all the requirements. If there is anything required, tell that to the boy that will arrive in a few minutes at your tent. He shall be your squire for the day. With that the knight left his tent to return to his duties to guard the royal family. Looking around inside the tent, Naruto noticed the full-plated ebony-colored armor on a rack. While it was not flashy or special, in any case it would do the deed. The only elegance with it, the cloak that rested at the side that was pure black in color with the three-headed dragon of the king's house on top of it. Quote ellipsis. Wish it was orange. With that Naruto started to place the armor plating on his body until he finally stood there with the gravers, gauntlets, chest plate, leg guards and boots. Turning to the tent flaps, a young boy in about the age of 8 stood there. My lord, I am here to help you. Is there anything I can aid you with? You can help me place my shoulder guards on before placing the cloak on my shoulders. The boy, almost like a cheetah, rushed to the shoulder guards and attempted to frantically place the shoulder guards. The high breathing of the boy gave it clearly away. He was afraid of something. Calm down, boy. If you rush it you might harm yourself. Getting only a nod and a quick, yes my lord, the boy started to slow down, giving Naruto some time to ponder on why the boy was so scared. Was he scared of some bully around? Maybe that he was given such a task to help a great noble knight with his armor? Or was he simply scared of Naruto himself? Either way, Naruto wanted to have this done with and spoke to the boy. So what is it you shall do after helping me getting my armor on, that is? Spoke the blonde while looking at the young man working on the final few links in his armor, securing the gear well enough. I am to help you at the tourney. That means hold your lance with the one you are wielding break. Take care of your horse after the tourney. With that the boy stood back and kept his head low. I see, well thanks a lot, go off now but be on time when the tourney starts. With that the boy left the tent and left Naruto alone again. Standing up on his 2 feet he would test out the armor a little. The plated armor really restricted his movements and he did not like that, not one bit. So with that he started to pump some chakra into his veins in a more intense manner, enhancing his muscles enough for them to pull on the plating while stretching the thick plate slightly. He finally manages to force it into a well enough shape so he could move around more freely. To prove that little point to himself, Naruto moved his arms about before jumping slightly on his feet, smiling at the increased mobility. Turning to the tent flaps for a moment, Naruto would grasp his belt that held the sheathed blade before securing it to his waist. Before making his way out, in front of his tent stood a coal-black horse that was saddled and all, and had the dressing of the tourney. Its colors were just as its fur, pure black in color with a 3-headed dragon on both sides. Smiling at the horse he would slowly approach it before stroking its head. Looking at the horse he could almost tell everything about this horse, its eyes. The horse, like him, was new to a tourney, yet it had seen things in the past. Her name is Lana, spoke a voice as Naruto turned to his right as he spotted the queen once again with Esir Dane once again at her side. I decided that instead of the classical favor that maybe she could be of good service to you. Smiling at the queen, Naruto bowed his head. She is beautiful, your grace. As Naruto said that and had a sincere smile on his lips, the queen was a bit taken aback before another smile came back on her lips, this one a bit different than her past ones, as she spoke. Please do not lose too quick, Esir Uzumaki, the king. My husband tends to have quick personality switches when someone displeases him. With that she gave him a soft nod before leaving. With Dane in tow, though not before, the man gave the blonde a small nod, not having forgotten what he did not a few nights ago. With that Naruto would grasp the reins of his horse before placing his boot inside the iron secure before finally sitting down on his horse. And with a gentle tug the horse moved on to the tourney grounds as soon it would be his turn to participate within the tourney. Riding onto the tourney grounds, Naruto held the black helmet on his head, yet the visor held up so he could at least have some more vision. He had been told his first opponent would be a man named John, one son of the lord of this castle. The man, while not in the fanciest armor, did show he knew how to wield that lance. Naruto himself prepared himself on his own side of the tourney fencing. Having his lance handed to him by that squire, he would look it over. The lance was a tourney lance, no piercing tip, no metal frame expects for it, the guard and handle. The tip was blunted, everything else would be made of simple wood. The wood was meant to break. Because if said lance was made of too strong wood, well, it would just destroy the man's chest if hit too hard, and he would wear the wrong chest plate. The color of his lance was pure black while it held red stripes, once again making it clear who he was representing. Turning his gaze to the side, his gaze fell on some familiar face. Said faces were the queen and king seated at the most well-looking seats. Beneath them were the tribunes of the higher lords of the kingdom of Westeros. In said seats he could remember said banners. The most left banner was the crest of House Martell, next to that banner was the dire wolf symbol of the Stark household. Lastly there was the banner that held the black stag on a golden field belonging to House Baratheon. In said seats in the same order sat Ashara Dane, next to her was the Princess Elia Martell. Following her was a handsome Dornish man. While Naruto did not know, this man was Oberyn Martell. At the Stark boot sat only Eddard Stark along with his younger brother Benjen Stark. Neither older brother nor younger sister was present. While he knew Ned's older brother would partake within the tourney, he was unsure of where Lyanna herself was right now. Not delving too much on said thought, he looked at the final seat. In said seat he did not find Robert Baratheon that he met along with the Stark host. Instead sat a younger man that seemed like the brooding type with an everlasting frown on his brow. Maybe Robert himself would also partake within this tourney. He had yet to see any other jousting. It seemed he and the, if he guessed right, youngest son of Lord Went would start off this tourney of the horse and lance. Turning his gaze to his opponent, he would hold the reins of his horse tightly before he would feel something touch the side of his arm. Turning towards it, he found a shield held up for him. Taking it, it was a simple shield with metal plating that held the symbol of the king's house. Quickly taking said shield, he fastened it to his hand before taking said reins of his horse. Lord Went once again had held a long speech, yet this time he had not taken a care to said words. Now he had to prepare himself, ready himself, and hold to beat someone in a sport that he would now do for the first time. Hooray for him? Yet just as he was starting to pay attention to said voice of Lord of Harrenhal, he heard the loud sound of the trumpets along with a loud, "Begin!" With that, both Naruto and his opponent kicked the horse forward, rushing forward and both lowering their lances to strike their foe. While the boy was sitting in said shield and seemed to hold his stance in a form of lock. Naruto himself, instead of locking in place, started to rise slowly from his saddle before he fully supported his weight on the iron secure for his boots and rose up from said saddle. The man, not expecting his opponent to actually stand in his seat, neither managed to keep his focus on his opponent nor where Naruto had his lance ready to strike. Realizing this at the last moment, he was about to move said shield up but quickly received the blow of Naruto's lance in his face. He was lucky to have said visor up, or he would have lost his nose and more. That strike was enough to send the man off his horse and down onto the tourney ground. Yet the sound Naruto received from the crowd was no cheering nor clapping, rather a loud gasp. Many of the people that Naruto's hit would be fatal to the man not on the ground. Yet the man slowly started to move from his downed position and finally stood up and held his right arm in the air to sign to the people that he was all right and would apparently be just fine. At that, the crowd exploded with cheers and chants of both Naruto and even the youngest son of Lord Went. Not ever many could take such a brutal hit to his face, even with a face plate protecting him, and stand up in the same minute. Yet it was clear whom the victor was. Raising his broken lance, Naruto smiled at the people in the crowd before riding off to his choir to give him the broken lance and make way for the next contestants. Hearing the announcer shout, he turned his head to the names of the next contestants. One man was called Esser Leslin Hay, while the other man was more announced with a title. As it seemed, no name was given. He was called the Knight of the Laughing Tree. Turning his head, he looked at said knight. He wore old bulky armor. In one hand was a shield that held a white background with the painting of a tree with red leaves, and a bloody face on the tree's bark was painted. While in his other hand was a plain wooden lance. It seemed more the lance for practice than anything to be used in a grand tourney. Turning his gaze of the knight's face, he could only see the shadow underneath the helmet. In other words, he could not determine whom was underneath that helmet. Instead, on dwelling on it, Naruto gave a nod to the knight while speaking out. "Good luck, I hope we might face one another in this tourney." With that, Naruto rode on as the knight did not give a reply. Yet for some reason Naruto did hear something from said knight. The shaky breathing, as if the knight was nervous of something. Well, this could be the first time in a tourney, and well, some are more nervous than others. Yet he could just not shake it off that the feeling about this night was rather off. Like something he should know but just could not see. Once Naruto was out the jousting arena, he simply stood back and watched the oncoming jousts. The Knight of the Laughing Tree, while he seemed rather clunky in movements, swiftly defeated his opponent. The knight strangely enough moved as if he was simply in armor that was too large for him. Maybe not enough funding for a matching fit? Then again, he was rather lucky that the king himself gave him his armor to wear for the tourney. After the Mystery Knight's victory over his enemy, there were many low-named lords and hedge knights partaking in the jousting. Yet many were unhorsed and brought down to the ground easy. The last few people riding was the Prince Rhaegar against a man called Yohn Royce. Rhaegar won said battle and went on to the next round. Furthermore, many of the king's guard partook and all won their match. If he was right today, every participant would have 2 matches before the next day. It was said that the joust would last for 5 days. Finally, it was his turn once again to ride. This time his opponent would be Naruto against Brandon Stark, the oldest of the Stark children. While they did meet at the inn, and he would like to think they made a small form of friendship, Naruto would not go easy on the man. At the sound of the horn, Naruto kicked the horse once again and both men went off riding to one another. Yet this match surprisingly was over rather quick. It took Naruto 1 strike on the man's shield. Naruto's lance slammed against the man's shield when he forced it forward against said shield. The shield was forced against the man's chest and lost his grip on the reins. With nothing to hold onto and the force of the impact, he was sent off flying off the large northern horse and brought down on his back. Raising his lance in the air, he earned a loud cheer at his victory from the crowd. Turning to Brandon, Naruto smiled as he let the lance fall onto the ground, and he would get off the horse it secures and down onto the ground, smiling at Brandon, and both clasped and shook hands. That was a good strike. You blonde bastard. That earned a large grin from said blonde, and he nodded. Yay, well, you are pretty good at falling flat on your back. At that both laughed loudly before both waved at the stages, earning a second cheer. With that they both departed and allowed for the next round. This round was between the Mystery Knight and a member of House Blount. No surprise to Naruto though when the knight once again won the match. With that the last few riders had their turns and the first day of the jousting tourney was done. Naruto himself, while ready to go for another round, decided he might as well let his horse rest a little. So, taking the reins of his horse, he leads it out the jousting area and walks to the stables, not really giving a care for what happens around him. A good few hours had passed and the sun was setting. That night, while Naruto would be sitting beside the same tree he slept in not too long ago, holding a small still, he simply kept poking the soil in front of him with it. Why? Because he simply tried to do something to pass the time. Then again, it also helped him think on matters and plans. While back at his home where he came from, he always simply went with the flow and improvised. Never did he really make a plan until later. A year or two after the 4th Shinobi War, Naruto had a desire to still become Hokage. Yet while the desire remained, he himself did know that he would need a better mind to become one and do an actual good job at it. Of course, he could try to use all the fame he got while after the war. But that is not the way he wanted to become Hokage. He wanted to become Hokage through him being the best. So, he could inspire anyone to strive forward, become stronger, and eventually they might hold the white hat of the Hokage. Now though he was gone from the Hidden Leaf, gone from the Land of Fire, hell, even gone from the elemental countries. So now he with no chance to become a Hokage, he decided that after everything he will do what he can to create a better future for these lands. Maybe he is no Hokage of these lands, or how they call it, a king. He would make sure he would do what he could. And he would start with his own village. After hearing people talk with one another, he knew with the money he already won he could already but a large patch of land in the Riverlands called Harrow's Town. The town was little more than a few houses with an inn, and most of the place flooded. It would be an excellent way to prove to these lands he could turn something doomed to fail into something that will thrive. Of course, every man had some greed and Naruto had his own part. His was more ambition than greed though. Looking at the ruins in front of him right now of Harrenhal, he could see multiple things. A haunting past that lingers still to this day. And opportunity to turn these ruins into something great. Of course, these ruins already belonged to a family, but if he would make enough money along with some good words and of course a promise for a good home for them, He could persuade them to grant the keep to him. Many people said the castle and ruins were ruined. Every family and or house that lived there has died out due strange things. From fires to simply suicide. Claims of hearing voices in the night and seeing ghosts in the hallways. Oh, he had a suspicion what might be wrong. But with some seals or even simply the use of chakra he could see these haunted and tortured spirits off into the afterlife. If not, well, he could always see how well a spirit will last against his power. Still, that chill down his spine did not speak too well to him after all. Damn ghosts are his fear. As a kid, at least, but now he might actually face a real ghost. Luckily that is a long time away. While poking the stick a little bit more in the ground, his thought and plans simply continued. For one, he would have to use jutsu to help him with the lands. Others could call it cheating, but he would simply call it the reward of years of hard work in his own home. That, and of course that he is now in another world and he might as well have damn earned it. All his life he has done nothing more than make sure others are safe from any dangers. So, he thought he himself earned to be a bit selfish at times. Or was he wrong to even think that? Either way, first he would make sure the lands were fertile along with building dams against the floods. With fertile lands, food would be no issue. The next thing he would need to focus on would be resources. Such as silk, wood, minerals. Well, wool could be gotten from sheep he could get through trade. So, that was not a huge issue. Silk, while no expert on it, he could always have a man hired from a place that would know. Wood? That was east really, he could simply grow an entire forest if he desired and send his people off to collect it. Lastly, the minerals. How indeed? Well, simple, and he had to thank the third Tsuchikage for that. His expertise over earth jutsu allowed Naruto himself to develop his own. He created one that created the density in the ground. And somehow many pieces of rock, sand and gravel would take shape or twist their form into different minerals. Such as iron, gold, silver, copper, sometimes even rare metal with the chakra enhanced inside of it. Never having named, he could simply claim it was a new kind of metal. What to name it? Chikara? It sounded rather corny to him, but maybe it could work. No matter. Luckily it was not just different metals but also gemstones. Such as emeralds, sapphires, rubies, diamonds, even gems that held almost a silver shine to it that once it is in the moonlight it will look like a miniature moon. Oh, yes, he could call this cheating, but then again. Did he care that much? No. Of course, no one could know of his powers. He had heard what happened to people that are rumored to hold magic. Those people of the faith would proclaim them as sinners working with dark powers, and a manhunt would be after him. As for all the things he shall create, of course, it will gain the attention of jealous, greedy and spiteful men. All of them wanting a piece of what he shall make. Luckily, he would never take something like that lying down. Of course, he knew he could not be everywhere, so why not simply start his own army while he is at it? Well, not so much an army, more a strong group. He would need a big place for a whole army. But with the right training and coordination, a small group of 50 men could defeat thousands if they know the land well enough. After all, it would require just one trap and army could be set ablaze. The more men die, the more men flee as well. Either way, all of that was long time away, and with a long time he meant a month max for him to get started with said village. Oh, and he would not mind his own private home. No village, no keep. Maybe near the Vale, a mountain home just for himself. Or himself and a future wife. While he never really paid too much attention to that, he knew that one day he might take one. After all, looking at some of the women in this world, he would doubt he would be able to keep it in his pants for long. I mean, look at some of them as flowers. Liana had this wild yet alluring look about her. A rough flower covered in thorns but still magnificent in some way. Ashara Dane seemed like one of the most beautiful flower about. Then there was the queen, while aged and saddened she still held her beauty. He did wonder why had she such a look that spoke of only tears and sorrow? Whenever he looked at her from on his horse and see the anger, sadness, resentment and simple hate directed to her brother. Then again, she was in a forced marriage, he doubted he would like it anymore. That, and the king was a mad man. He did not need to hear rumors to know. It was easy to see from his long ugly hair to the long curled nails. The crazed look waiting for a monster to jump on him any moment, along with the quick switch of emotion. Of course, there were some other women about, but those were the ones he at least knew a bit of their name of. Thinking of the king though, Naruto did wonder why was the king so generous. Was it simply the madness or was there more at hand? Either way he would have to wait and see. He also should keep his eyes open. Looking about at the tourney from his horse he recalled the looks he got. The looks of suspicion and judgment. But he would show them he is not one to be bent down and scared by their gaze. He would only grow stronger from them. Now though if he won this tourney he would only have a far more easier time in making his village and eventually his own land. People would sing of his victory and chant his name. Would he offer them a place in his new town? Many homeless would take such an opportunity? Not only that, but with wood style he would easily be able to make simple houses for them. He could of course make them better houses and all, but that would for one raise questions and for two earn the attention of not just the people the homes are meant for. I ought to make a lot of PR, yet his words were interrupted by the rushed feet heading towards him. Raising his head, he would look at the bough the king had assigned as his square. Looking at the bough he would be panting loudly while leaning on his knees. Tisk no condition, were his thoughts before the boy would finally calm his breathing and straighten his back. Sir Uzumaki, it is nearing eve and the king is wondering why his champion is not there at the feast. All the other competitors are there, along with high lords from all corners of Westeros. Naruto would simply keep his gaze on the boy while raising his brow. I do not have anything to wear, kid. How should I present myself in full plate at a party? As he asked that, the boys smiled and spoke out. The king also has seen to that. You just have to head to your tent again and there would be some clothing that would be suitable. With that the boy ran off again to whoever knows where. That kid, excellent runner, but most other lords would beat him for leaving without permission. Sighing deeply, Naruto made his way to his tent to get himself dressed in the right manner. At the feast, feasting, eating, drinking, dancing and singing. That is what Naruto arrived at once he entered the giant tent that was holding the party inside. Oh, outside there was the party, but inside was where the big named people were. Naruto himself was right now dressed in a black tunic with orange pants. There was not much to his dress of state, but he did not mind he missed his own clothing more. Too bad it was ripped beyond repair, so now he had to go with this damn monkey suit. Walking forward into the light, some of the attendees noticed his arrival and it had mixed reactions. Some looked at him with smiles, though some were more of the drunken kind. While others were frowns, scowls or even glares. Without a doubt those were the people seeing him as a whelp out its cage. That he is not supposed to be among them. Well, he never really cared what snobs used to think of him, so why should he start now? With that, Naruto made his way through the people and food before arriving near the large table that held the royal family. Walking forward, Naruto would already be noticed by all attendants of the table. Also, here he was received with mixed gazes. Yet none too threatening though. The first one was a small smile on the lips of the queen as she looked at Naruto, while her husband would turn his crazed gaze once again on Naruto, yet the crazed eyes would seem to calm slightly once they fell on the Uzumaki, along with his lips turning into a somewhat smile. Further, there was the Princess Elia Martell. She gave Naruto a small smile along with a small nod, apparently remembering the blonde man. Lastly, there were two more. One was a young gold, silver-haired man at the age of around 18 to 20. He himself simply gave Naruto a neutral look. While the last one was a bald man, he gave Naruto a polite smile and nod, yet he didn't seem like he wished to be here at all. Oh, and of course the friendly suits of armor behind and beside the table. All of them being the king's guard members. Knowing better, he simply stood in front of the table, directly in front of the table, and make a low bow with his back. "Your Grace," spoke the blonde. The king's gaze remained on the blonde while it seemed he was listening to someone speaking, yet all those around him all were facing the blonde. All a bit curious about this apparent low-born. Yet their gaze fell back on their king once he spoke out. "Welcome, my champion. Welcome to the feast. I shall keep this short. You may enjoy yourself here, but I want you to be ready for tomorrow's round of the tourney. Remember, you represent the crown and I shall not have it be belittled by a young man that was drunk the evening before." With that, the king waved his hand in dismissal for the blonde. "Of course, your grace." With that, Naruto gave a bow to the king and turned around and went to an enlarged table that held the Stark household. Yet while making his way towards the familiar faces of the Starks, he could only think about the king right now. The way he seemed, it was clear he was mad in the mind, yet there was more to this. He would have to think about this some more. Naruto, was the shout that he got when he arrived at the table from the Stark girl known as Lyanna Stark. To her left was her brother Eddard, or as most of his family and friends referred to him as Ned Stark. While beside Ned sat the man known as Robert Baratheon, Naruto remembering him from his drunken adventure at the Crossroad Inn. On her other side was both her elders and younger brother Brandon Stark and Benjen Stark respectively. Lastly, while keeping his head rather low and not really willing to get too much of attention, was a small man around the age of Ned. "Are you dozing off? Don't tell me you are drunk already." Hee sorry Lady Lyanna, I was just deep in thought." "How's your evening?" spoke the blonde with a bit of an awkward smile on his lips while rubbing the back of his head at his lack of paying attention. She only looked at him for a moment with some form of a pout before a smile came on her lips and she spoke. "Oh, the feast is fun. It is indeed different than the feasts in the north. But enough about this stupid feast. Why did you not tell us you were competing at the joust as well?" With all due respect, my lady. I was not really planning on joining the joust, but the king's offer was rather unexpected. Then again, here I am now and I intend to win," spoke the blonde with a confident smile on his lips. "Oh really, I heard this Knight of the Laughing Tree might win actually," spoke the young woman with a sudden chance in her smile. "I mean, he has beaten all those that have gone before him." "Oh, I have seen him joust, he is decent, but I think there is a small or a thin man inside," spoke the blonde with a small smile on his lips. "What makes you think that?" spoke the daughter of Winterfell with an offended tone. "What makes you think he is small or thin?" "Well, I saw him move and his armor is moving so freely, so either he did not secure his straps or the armor is too large, and well, I rather think it is the later than the other option." "Oh, yay, that could be fair enough." She spoke again before turning away for a moment and seemed to curse to herself while her younger brother looked worried somewhat towards his sister. "Either way, I simply came by to say hello. I was planning to stay for a little bit before I made my way off again." "You know, big day again tomorrow," spoke the blonde with an rather easygoing smile, earning only a small nod and smile from two of the Stark children as the others seemed too occupied with other things. With too occupied, Naruto meant Ned holding his friend down so he would not fall the moment he stood. While the eldest Stark was ogling the purple-eyed friend of Princess Elia Martell with a slight dreamy gaze. The remainder of the eve was kept simple for Naruto. Most of the people kept their distance from the blonde as they were unsure on how to deal with him. Luckily, when the dancing began, he actually shared some few dances. The first was offered by Lyanna. While happily agreeing he could do without the glowering Baratheon staring at him. Naruto actually enjoyed the dance. One of said reasons was because neither of them really knew how to dance, so they simply tried to do their best with as much feet stepping as possible. The second song came up and his partner was taken this time by her younger brother demanding his own dance, while said sister happily agreed. So for the second song he stood at the side. Yet at the third song he did gain a new dancing partner. This being the purpled girl that the eldest Stark and well most other men were keeping their gaze on. She simply stood in front of him and had offered her hand to him. He took it, and with that she pulled him in for a dance. The song and so the dance was short. She did not say anything but a friendly greeting while the whole dance she kept her gaze on Naruto's eyes. Yet at the end of the dance she seemed to have a slight frown on her gaze and gave a curt bow to the blonde and spoke up. "Thank you for the dance," and made her escape. "Was it something on my face?" was the only thought the blonde had before the last song started to play, yet was immediately stopped as the king raised his hand. "While all of you have had joy this eve, I fear my wife has been remeed in a dance. As I fear she will not have any joy this eve, will there be anyone that will offer her a dance?" spoke the king. Yet after he said his words no one was sure on what to do. On one side, who would not want to share a dance with the woman? While she was in her 30s, she had the fair face of that of a young woman in her 20s. Yet there was one issue, namely the one that gave the demand for the queen to have a dance. As many knew, the king had a lot of mood swings. While now he offered them a dance with the queen, which was his wife. An hour later or even a day later he might see them as having insulted him and demands their head. So only those that were willing to take a large risk would have to be foolish enough to offer the queen a dance. And so Naruto stepped forward and offered his hand to the queen while giving a small smile while speaking to both the king and the queen. "While I am a terrible dancer, if I can entertain her slightly with a dance, then I shall do what I can." At that the king actually gave and smile. Again the strange crooked smile that should never be named a smile, but either way a smile. "Well, my queen, shall you accept this dance of our dear champion?" At that the queen gave a small nod to her husband before turning her gaze back to Naruto and stood up while placing her fingers on his palm, giving a small smile. "Thank you for this dance, sir." And with that they shared a dance. Yet during the dance the queen gave Naruto different glances. Those of fear and those that simply could only wonder. Of a life of what if she had not been born as a Targaryen but maybe low born, would things have been different? The dance ended soon enough and she thanked Naruto for the dance before retreating for the night. Naruto himself also did not take care of a lot of things. He simply tried to enjoy himself as much as possible, yet the loathful gazes from noble men and some women he got simply drowned the joy in his mood, and he soon enough excused himself. And so he once again lied in the tree he was in last night, simply having his eyes closed and listening to the distant voices and the crickets in the grass. Yet even his short moment of peace was interrupted once he heard the rustling of leaves as he saw Liana along with her younger brother make her way through the bushes. While he knew this was not his business, he could simply not stop himself from following. That, and it has been such a long time since he had used some old jutsu jumps that he could not help himself. So standing up on the tree he looked towards the woods for just a moment before he disappeared in a second. While to him it was clear it was a jump. To the man that had his gaze on the blonde, he simply stood there one moment and disappeared the next. The man was bald and held noble robes around his frame. This man was known as the spider. And he might just have found a new insect that was near his web. Yet how things seems to be turning out, this insect might as well be a bird looking for a spider to feed on. Back with Naruto, he had followed both Stark children before finally noticing both of them hanging what looked like a shield in a tree. Really no longer caring to keep himself hidden, he would drop down on the ground and immediately alert both of the Starks. "Naruto? What are you doing here?" spoke the rather shocked Liana as she stared at Naruto. Simply crossing his arms with a slight smirk on his lips, he would simply motion his head sideways as in letting her know he saw her hang the shield. Now that he gained a better look at it, the shield simply had a heart tree painted on it with a face on its bark. "That is the Mystery Knight's shield. Look, it's not WH." She tried to say but was stopped by the raised hand of Naruto. "Well, I hope he will be thanking you soon for finding his shield and leaving it for him in this tree." As he said that, he would give both Starks a cheeky smile while both Stark children lowered their shoulders and let a breath escape their lungs. "Either way, I do not believe your older brothers will like it that you two are all alone at night this far in the woods." Turning around he would motion with his hand for them to follow him. "Shall we go?" Not long after having said those words, both Stark children were on his tail, quickly following after him. "How did you know?" spoke Liana once again, looking at the blonde. "Know what?" And that was all they had said until they returned to the many tents and he left them there before bidding them both a good night. After that he returned to his tree and finally managed to get himself some sleep. Such a bothersome, damn it Shikamaru, infecting me with your catchphrase. Right now, Naruto sat on his horse at the tourney looking over at the other side of the field. Right now, he might face the thoughts opponent he has yet faced. After all, he right now was facing the prince himself. After he had defeated one more rider, the man named Yon Royce, the lord of House Royce. Naruto had defeated the man, yet he had to admit the man was a though man, and even when he was defeated, the man, while proud, did commend him on his victory and give him a single bow of his head in respect. Yet now he was facing the prince himself. The winner of this match would be facing the finalist, the King's Guard Barristan Selmy. Yet that would be his concern later if he won at least. After all, while the man he would face now is a prince, he was no joke. Then again, Naruto did not intend to take it easy on him, nor did he intend to lose. After all, he had his own plans, and if he had to hurt the pride of the prince, or even as the king had speculated, destroy someone else's plan, then he would. At the sound of the horn, both riders charged, both lowered their lances at the last moment so neither could predict the other's move. Being surprised, Naruto got hit first by the prince, hit right at his chest, forcing him almost off the horse itself, yet the lance broke apart, and while the blow was there he managed to pull himself back on his saddle in time. Groaning in discomfort, he would roll his right arm slightly as the slight dent in his armor was clear. The force was a powerful one, but he would not be broken that easily. Looking at his own lance, he noticed the lack of any damage on it, clearly showing the lance had not hit its mark. Turning his horse again, he would prepare himself for the second charge as the prince was given his new lance. At the sound of the horn again, Naruto kicked their sides of his horse and both riders were off again. Yet this time once again Rhaegar hit his chest at the same spot. For some reason his horse acted as if something was wrong. Or maybe as if something was calling him? Either way, once again Naruto and Rhaegar charged off again, and with the third strike the prince once again hit Naruto on his plate. Slowly riding to the end of the wooden rails, Naruto slowly unstrapped his helmet and took a deep inhale of breath. The plate had bent in such a manner it was tightened around his chest, giving only a small amount of air. Giving himself a small pause, he finally turned to the other side of the field and making up his mind that this was his last chance to beat the prince. Another blow like that and the plate would bend in such a way it would start to cave into his chest. With the helmet back on his head, Naruto once again charged forward. Not a moment later the prince rode forth as well. Both riders were closing nearer and nearer. Naruto already had his lance down, while Rhaegar once again would wait for the right moment to lower his. Aiming for his waistline, Naruto's plan was simple: hit him at the waist and force him off the saddle and down into the dirt. Yet it was not just all. He had noticed just before his charge why his horse started to act in such a manner. If the prince knew or not, Naruto did not know, but his horse was a female and it gave off the scent of it looking to mate, and Naruto's horse was more than eager, yet with both a rider on the horses that was rather difficult. So instead it simply tried to follow the scent as its nature was. This time Naruto would make sure he would win. Some might call it cheating, which it rather was, but his own plan was simple. A small dojutsu and the soil for Rhaegar's horse had softened, almost nearly being mud. Both rider and horse unprepared for this caused a slight slowing in the horse, its speed, and Rhaegar's lance of lowering. And that was all Naruto needed. Bringing chakra in his arm, he forced the lance forward in one strong push, forcing the rider off his horse and down onto the soil. While the prince, his horse, would ride on, either not knowing or not caring that its rider was missing. At Naruto's victory the entire tourney was silent. Both noble and peasant, high and low born, did not speak. That is of course until the king himself stood up and clapped. Not long, although a lot of them reluctant, started the clap for Naruto's victory as well. After all, while Rhaegar was the prince and adored by both high and low born, once Naruto beat him and the king himself would clap for the blonde, they might as well join. Naruto, while not feeling proud of his cheated victory, he did it with a purpose. Not only that, but in the end, he grew up as a shinobi. Deception was part of that line of work. While most of his life he did not spend his life as a liar, he did not feel below it. After all, now in a new land and world he had to use all his skills to use. Be it jutsu, charisma, strength and wisdom. Turning his head, he looks at Rhaegar as he slowly got up while rubbing his plated stomach. While at his side was one Arthur Dane helping said prince. The prince looked towards the blonde. For a moment, the prince would give Naruto a foul look before his eyes lowers and nodded his head, admitting defeat. With that the prince walked off the tourney as the lord of house went himself stood up and made another announcement regarding the last match. With the king's champion, having prevailed over even the king's own son, Naruto Uzumaki shall face one more opponent in the finale. The man is none other than Esir Barristan Selmy. May the gods favor them both. The match shall start in 30 minutes to give Esir Uzumaki a moment to rest. With that he earned some claps while Naruto walked off the field with his horse, its reins in his hand. He would have to see to this armor and make it straight again. Returning to the field once again, Naruto would have the plate sadly not repaired, so arriving at the field with a dented in chest plate was rather comical. And the people were all too happy to point it out before they would snicker to themselves. Strange these people are. One moment they are in love with you and the next they seek to laugh at your misfortune. With that said, Naruto rode forward on his horse while his lance was risen high in the air. On the opposite side sat the last man remaining to be defeated. The man known as Esir Barristan Selmy. In his golden armor and white cloak, the man would slowly ride up towards Naruto while Naruto himself also rides forward on his own horse, both men passing each other while giving each other a small nod in acknowledgement. Before both one another passed each other, the announcer of the tourney shouted out loud, earning the attention of both participants and almost everyone really. The participants of the final round may ask a lady for their favor if they so desire. That earned some catcalls from the common folk at the side, while some of the noble ladies would suddenly turn rather shy. Esir Barristan took the first initiative as he rides his horse towards the tribunes before halting his horse at the seat of House Dane, asking for the Lady Ashara for her favor. And so indeed he got the favor from her as she tied a thin piece of silk in purple color around his lance. With the king's guard riding to his side of the field, Naruto himself rode towards the tribunes, riding past the noble houses until he would reach the seat of the royals, where he stopped his horse and looking up first at the king before his gaze fell on the queen. "Your Grace, as I fight as your champion, I beg of the honor to wield the favor of your wife and queen." The Uzumaki spoke while holding up the lance. Murmurs followed shortly after, as this was considered more than just scandalous, a low-born man asking for the favor of a queen. Yet most murmurs stopped as the king himself stood up. Turning to his wife, he would reach his hand out to her before he gripped the left sleeve of her dress and pulled, tearing the silk before throwing it towards the blonde. Yet while this happened, no one gasped, no one did anything, they simply looked as the king practically teared at his wife's dress. Catching the piece of clothing, Naruto looks back up, this time at the king with the edge of red in his eyes. "Now go," spoke the king before he sat back down. Looking at the king for just a moment longer, almost staring him down, Naruto finally looks to the king's side, locking his gaze with the queen. Yet she sat there stone-faced, killing any emotion that threatened to reach her face. Only bowing his head, Naruto slowly rode to his side of the field while tying the piece of silk around his right arm. Not much happened after the horn sounded and both riders charged forward. No cheers were heard as both riders clashed their lances. Most expected it to be a grand spectacle, yet instead it was a short one. Once Naruto's lance thrusted itself into the plate of Ser Baristan, there was a loud cracking sound from the wooden lance before the knight himself would fall off the back of his horse and down on the ground. It took the Uzumaki one lance to take his foe down. With his victory in hand, Naruto simply rode to the side of the tribunes before stopping in front of the king's tribune. Some mild clapping was heard, yet most of the people were silent. They were just rather confused. This no-named nobody showed up one day and cut his way through 2 parts of the tournament. It was simply mind-boggling to them. Yet in the end, no one could deny his skill nor that he won. Once the Uzumaki stopped in front of the tribunes of the king, he would only look up at him as the king himself smiled. "You have proven yourself my champion, and as champion you shall be rewarded." Yet the Uzumaki did not say anything, he could only look up at the king while the same red tinge remained at the edges of his pupils. Naruto could not explain why, but felt such anger towards the king when he ripped his wife's dress, and right now he did not trust himself to speak, so instead he would shakenly bow his head before preparing for himself to ride off. "Hold on there, my champion, for you still need to crown your queen of love and beauty." As he said that, a squire came running across the field holding a cushion that held a crown of blue flowers. Looking down at the cushion for a moment, Naruto simply gripped the crown in his hand and placed it on his lance before rising it up high towards the queen. "As I wear her favor, my king, it should only be fitting I crown her as the queen of beauty," spoke the blonde before either the king nor Naruto could say anything. The queen herself simply stood up and took the crown in her hands before she placed it on her head. Looking down at the Uzumaki, she would give him a small smile, breaking the stone face of her for a brief second as she spoke. "Thank you, Sir Uzumaki, you honor me with this." With that she sat down while the king could only look at her for a moment before looking down at the blonde. He was no fool, he knew his wife has not smiled for a long time, yet this blonde made her smile. Even more, a moment, but a smile nonetheless. "Well then, we have our champion." At that the crowd erupted in cheers and loud clapping as the king himself simply looked down at the blonde with a smile on his lips. Yet the blonde simply kept his gaze locked on the king. And he felt his gaze on him almost like a wolf that was about to eat a crippled lamb. And he was the lamb. Shaking his head, he waved his hand at the Uzumaki while he shouted, "Your price shall be given to you at your tent." With that, Naruto moved his gaze away from the king and rode off to his tent, not sparing anyone another glance, while the red tint in his eyes slowly dissipated, returning his gaze to the ocean blue color. 2 days after Naruto's victory. Seated on his horse, Naruto rides north from the large ruins known as Heron Hall. You see, he had done it with all his earnings and now fame. He had bought land that now belonged to him. While yes, he could have had a better deal, he was sure of himself that he would succeed in fertilizing the land and make a great place to live. The lands he now owned reached from its southern border, just bordering Heron Hall, while reaching just past the Trident's riverbank for a few miles. The people in this region lived in hovels, no stone houses. Just houses made of sticks and straw. No strong wooden foundation or comforting walls. No, just hovels. The only place in this area that had a somewhat decent look was the crossroad inn reaching just at the edge of his borders. Luckily Naruto did not come to these lands he now claimed on his own, at least not yet. He had hired a crew of masons and craftsmen to come to the village of Haraway. The village was sadly abandoned once he arrived, for all but a few people that simply made the overflown village their home. Once he announced he had bought this land and told them of his plan with this land, many of them were all too happy to help out in return for security and a home to have for themselves. And he agreed to that. He had promised them that within 3 months they would all have a home. Yet for now they would have to go into the hills, as he would need to make way for the craftsmen and masons to arrive so they could start to build. 1 month later, Naruto could only but smile at his work. 1 week it had taken for his hired help to arrive. And in that time, he has been busy. He had used his chakra to work once the people that inhabitat this place had left. Using earth jutsu, he had risen the land of the town higher, allowing the water to flow back in the river. While all that remained of the village was ruined, the water had done its damage, and to rebuild these houses would take more work than he would have to make a wild new house. So, putting his dojutsu to work, he had flattened the earth with every piece of the previous houses now removed from sight. Not long after, he had used his wood jutsu to set down foundations for new houses. Over 70 foundations were risen, along with at the edge of the river a large line of wooden pillars were resting at the now solid stone, supporting the stone and dirt for the future if the water would once again rise high. Overall, in the end, once the hired help arrived, they arrived at an already half-complete job. The foundation and pillars already were placed. All that was required was for the stone walls to be placed and the roofs to be set. This was done in 2 weeks. Sure, Naruto could do it on his own with jutsu, but well, he did not mind to for once simply watch the hired help take care of it. Now he stood there in front of a new line of trees that bore multiple fruits, from apples to pears. From as common as a walnut tree to some rare peach and olive trees. Many of the trees held the same purpose: provide fresh food to the people and himself that would soon make their home here. Now some may be wondering why would there be trees as ripe as these here? How did they get there? As a week before there was nothing but soppy mud, the type of mud just black in color, and once your foot would rest on it and would want to support more than the weight of that food, it would just swallow foot, shoe, leg, and not shortly after body whole. Given a few years, maybe it could turn into some good soil. Sadly, Naruto did not have the time, not patience. Luckily, he was a ass from either a different time or a different universe. He had still not decided on that yet. So instead of following the wisdom of patience, he simply decided to use his chakra. Using his dojutsu first to make the right ground and dirt along with soil to make sure the trees would grow. Spending only 10 minutes spreading seeds through the large field, he made use of one of his proudest type of jutsu. Mokuton. Now he stood there, having forced the seeds to grow from first their seedling stage to their sapling stages on the first day. Over the 2 weeks he applied the required chakra along with the same mokuton on said saplings, and slowly turning them into strong, large, healthy trees, and they provided ripe and good food. He would know he ate some himself. Yet now he had moved from the large fruit trees to the nearby woods. While unintentional, the woods themselves had just been flourishing with the fruit trees from once simple trees that would not impress most people. They had now all had their healthy color on their barks, lush green leaves, and instead of dirt or soil below them, the grass had risen. Overall, it made a beautiful picture. You know, I love what I have done with the place. At first it was nothing more than a village that was half sunken by the river. Yet that's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share, and do comments.